You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Looking forward to today's Total Wellness Tuesday show, where we are going to decipher the big difference between keto diets and low-carb diets. Because right now, a lot of people say they're following a keto diet, but they're actually nowhere near it. And it could be detrimental to not only their fat loss results or their body transformation results or their health results, but also they could be stripping muscle mass off their body and breaking down their metabolism at the same time. That is not something I do want for you. I want you to stay nice and safe, nice and healthy. So if you decide that the keto diet is right for you, or you decide low carb is right for you, I want to help you best achieve that. So a lot of people have heard the Cabral concept before. They know my feelings on the keto-based diet. You'll get that towards the end of today's show if you don't already know. But really, my philosophy and my mission is to provide you with the truth and unbiased-based research. So what I'm going to do today is actually show you all the benefits of a keto-based diet, and I'm going to show you the benefits of a low-carb diet, explain the differences, explain why you might want to use one, why you might want to use the other, and just help you to better achieve your goals. So a lot of people are following a keto-based diet because they want to transform their body. That's the main thing. A lot of other people, they call themselves biohackers, and they're just kind of like doing it for the fun of it, whatever that might be. But a lot of the times we're trying to become what we call fat adapted. It just means that we're trying to better tap into our body fat as a fuel source, as if glucose wasn't a good fuel source, but some people feel that we need to become more fat adapted, which if you're trying to lose body fat, I completely understand that. That makes a lot of sense. So what we do in my practice is we actually do follow a low-carb diet with points of ketosis based in it. And I'll explain all of that to you today and show you how we use it for our body transformation practice in the short term, while then weaning people off of that after about the 3-week mark to 4-week mark. So let's go over to that right now. So here's the thing. The keto diet and the low-carb diet are often mistaken for each other. They're called the low-carb diet, the low-carb high-fat diet, the LCHF diet. They go by a lot of different names, but there's actually a big difference. So they're both low carb. That's where the confusion comes from. So the similarities, we'll go through that first. The similarities are they're both low carb. The difference is, though, a low carb diet is somewhat relative and somewhat subjective. A lot of people would say that a low carb diet is somewhere around 20 to 40% of their calories or the macro intake, somewhere around maybe 100 grams of carbohydrates per day. Now, but again, that's not set in stone. And I'll tell you why. Because some people, like an athlete, they might be on 400 grams of carbs a day, 600 grams of carbs per day. And then they decide, you know what, I'm going to be a low-carb athlete or a keto-based athlete. I'm going to take my carbs down to, let's say, 100 grams or 200 grams. For them, that's relatively low-carb for them. So what we're looking at is low-carb is all relative, but most people would agree that usually 100 grams of carbohydrates per day or below would be low-carb. Now, just to give you an estimate, a cup of fruit is somewhere around 25, 30 grams of carbs. A cup of rice, somewhere around 44 grams of carbs. Any type of starch, things like that, somewhere around that amount. So that would allow you for about 2 cups of carbs per day on a low-carb diet, okay? Vegetables are going to be quite low, but those still do count as net carbohydrates, all right? It still does matter. So low-carb is relative. However, keto is not. And that's because keto is usually 20 to 30 grams of net carbs per day, 50 grams maximum. Most people agree on that. Keep in mind, there are different forms of a keto-based diet, but I'm going to give you the parameters, how you know that you're on a keto-based diet in just one moment. So, no more than 50 grams of carbs per day. That includes vegetables. That includes all starches. That includes everything. And usually, if you're on a keto-based diet, you're not doing any starches, whether it's root vegetables or whether it's grains. You are strictly sticking to vegetables as your carbohydrates, which again is a good idea to do. Okay. The other thing about a keto-based diet is it's almost always 5% only of your macros as carbohydrates. So there's an important point to this as well. I'm going to name that in just a moment. Now, keto diets will vary between 5 and 10% carbohydrates of your diet. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you look at all of your macros, your fats, your proteins, and your carbs, out of all of those macros for the day, well, let's look at in terms of calories. Only 5% of that is going to be from carbohydrates. That's really important to look at because 75% of the diet is going to be fat. All right, 75% of the diet is going to be fat. Now, if you're looking at like a registered dietitian or the USDA or any of those things, they'll say somewhere between maybe 20%, 30% maximum fat. So in a keto-based diet, you're up to 75% fat. If you're on a Blue Zones-based diet for longevity, for overall health, based on thousands of years of ancestral-based health, you're on maybe 10% to 20% fat of your diet, or probably 20%, and about 10% protein. Now, the keto-based diet, this is very, very important. The keto-based diet, unlike a low-carb diet, and this is the big difference, besides what I'm about to share with you in one moment, is that protein must be kept low as well. So on a keto-based diet, no more than 20% of your macros can be protein, and I'm going to tell you why. That's usually about 0.8 grams or so per pound of body weight, all right? So it's about half your body weight, a little bit less. So if you weigh 160 pounds, it's going to be around 60 grams of protein or so per day. Why is this important? Okay, here's why. If you are taking in too much protein on a keto-based diet, your body will not be able to drop into ketosis. This is the big difference. It will not be able to drop into ketosis. If this happens, your body will not be tapping into ketones. Your liver and the rest of your body will actually start to go through a process called gluconeogenesis, where your liver will actually start to convert proteins into glucose. And as the body does this, it's now able to run off sugars, which you might say, okay, well, that's normal. The body can do that. Well, not necessarily. And here's why. Because your body, it's going to have to start using amino acids as well. That means your body's going to start stripping muscle mass. So they've done head-to-head studies on a low-carb diet, but one that does not limit protein, and they've done a keto-based diet. So now what we have is this. We have keto-based diets burning probably about almost double. This studies have been done since 1971, so it's been a while now. The studies show that you'll burn almost twice as much body fat and half that in terms of muscle tissue. Really, really important to look at. So if you're going to follow a keto-based diet, remember, it's fat that's high. Protein is not moderate, it's low to moderate. It's only 0.8 grams per day. Now, that might be moderate to high for you if you're not following up at least 0.8 per gram of body weight, but a keto-based diet is around 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. Really important to look at that as well. So if we know that carbs are supposed to be very low, a couple cups of vegetables, and protein's only supposed to be somewhere, let's say about 2 handfuls of protein a day, well, we're really then getting all of our calories, 75% of it from fat. This is where the keto diet can get out of control. People will eat a lot of bacon. They'll eat a lot of saturated base fats. Now, you can go through you can cherry pick studies to show, well, saturated fats out there are bad. Well, they can be, okay? They can be, especially for those that have a specific ApoE blood type, a specific allele called a 4 allele, which I've spoken about before. Now, the people who do best with a saturated fat diet are actually people with the number 2 allele. So you can do a genetic test to actually find all of this out. But that's a very small percentage of the population. That is an older-based specific part of your genome, which not a lot of people have genetically. And I think that's really important to look at because you don't even know the inflammation that you may be causing on a keto-based diet. So I just want to look at that. If you've never run your genetics before, I'm going to link that up in the show notes today. Just go to stephencabral.com/690, and I'll link up all these things today. So really, really important to look at. So if you're going to follow a keto-based diet, I want to help you do it to a healthier degree. So I want you to shoot for healthy fats, all right? The majority of your calories are going to come from olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds, and a lot of the healthy fats. And yes, you can get a little bit of coconut oil in there as well. Now, when we're talking about all right, here's the thing. When you go into a state of ketosis, your body starts to produce these things called ketones. Now, instead of your body and brain running off glucose, which again, your body always runs off body fat and glucose. It does both. It oxidizes body fat and it uses glucose as well. It just depends on the glycolytic mechanism that your body's in. So for example, if you need a fast fuel source, you're running a sprint, you're doing a high intensity interval training, your body's in a fight or flight, whatever it might be, you're going to need glucose. That's just how the body operates. It's a fast fuel source. Makes a lot of sense. The brain uses almost predominantly glucose to run. Now, when your body's at rest, when it's lying down, when you're sitting down, when you're just going for a light walk, it's using predominantly body fat. It's oxidizing body fat. Granted, it's not oxidizing a lot of it, but it is predominantly coming from body fat. So your body knows when to tap into which method of fat burning, or whether it's, I should say, energy burning from either glucose or from body fat. So it can do both. However, when you're in a state of ketosis, now for most people, that without using exogenous ketones, which means without taking MCT oil or other things into the body, okay, that means from the outside, because you can add ketones essentially to your body by doing something like MCT oil. What happens is after somewhere about 24 to 72 hours, depending on the amount of glucose you have stored up in your liver and bloodstream as well, you're going to start to produce ketones. Now, those ketones then are going to be used as a preferred fuel method. You're going to tap into more body fat, yes, and you're going to use ketones as a fuel source. So how do you know if you're actually in ketosis? Well, you can notice it on your breath. You can a lot of different ways, but here's the thing. I always like to keep things simple, really simple. That's the whole point of this. For under $10, you can get keto-based sticks or keto strips. I'm going to link those up in the show notes. Just go to stephencabral.com/690. I have no affiliation with the company. I'm going to link them up. I think they're like $8 or $9. What you can do is you can actually urinate on these strips to see if you are in a state of ketosis. Now, remember, for the first day or two, you might actually not be producing as much or as many ketones. Some people, I just have to let you know too, genetically do not produce as many millimoles of ketones as others. So this is the difference. How do you know if you're on a low carb diet or a keto-based diet? Well, you're going to be somewhere between 0.5 and 5 millimoles. That means when you urinate on these test strips, you're going to be, again, somewhere between 0.5 and 5. The higher, well, the more on ketosis or ketotic-based state you are. So when people read about ketosis, sometimes they get a little worried because they read about this thing called ketoacidosis, which is essentially a metabolic-based condition that really does affect the kidneys, the nervous system, the entire body. That can be fatal if left untreated. However, most people are not going to ketoacidosis. They're in a state of ketosis, which is completely different. Diabetics, type 1 diabetics, could go into a state of ketoacidosis, which then could be fatal to them, which is why it's very, very imperative and very important that if you are taking insulin, you take the right amount, that you are not going too low in blood sugar as well. Really, really important. So obviously, as health practitioners, we're working with our type 1 diabetic patients or wellness clients to help them maintain an average and normal base of carbohydrates on a daily basis. And a keto-based diet for type 1 diabetics, probably not a great idea. A lower carb diet, maybe bordering on a keto-based diet for type 2 diabetics, could be okay if working with a qualified health practitioner. We could talk about that in just a moment. So here's the difference. A low carb diet can be a great overall lifestyle-based diet, which we'll talk about in one moment, as long as you're timing all of your carbs correctly, so your body's always getting the fuel source of these low carbs, but at the same time, tapping into body fat. Now, a keto-based diet needs to be more closely monitored. You probably should be, not saying always, but probably should be using maybe some MCT oil, some exogenous forms of ketones, just for additional fuel. That's all. Again, not necessary. I'm not saying that you need it if you are getting in enough good quality fats and you're not going overboard on the bacon train. So that's really important. And then also that you're not high protein. It's so important. If you take one big takeaway, it's if you're on a keto-based diet, you can't be eating burgers and all of this heavy meat because it's going to throw you right out of ketosis. You'll feel like you have the keto-based flu, which is, not good. I mean, your body's breaking down its own muscle tissue in that specific state. Okay, so now I'd like to provide you with my take on a keto-based diet. So one of the reasons why it's become so unbelievably popular right now is that flat out it works, and it works predominantly, though, for men. And I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. I've been explaining this on a lot of podcast interviews that I've been asked to go on, just talking about ketosis, because people know me as just not having a dog in the race, right? Like, I don't care who's right. It does not matter to me at all. What matters to me are the results that we get people, not just in the short term, which is what a keto-based diet can do for you, but also the long term. All right, so here's the thing. Men seem to do much, much better on a keto-based diet, especially if they are the endomorphic body type. All right, the endomorphic body type, which is the kapha body type in Ayurveda, it's been known for thousands of years. This body type does better on a lower starch diet, a lower carbohydrate diet. And the reason is they are naturally an oxidizer of body fat rather than glucose. And the reason is that they are not as prone to being in the sympathetic nervous system like a vata or ectomorph would be, which, as you know, a vata body type, probably, as you know, like you have friends that are just very thin-jointed, thinner people, and they can eat tons of carbohydrates, and they don't gain body fat. And the reason is that they are using glucose as their predominant fuel source, since they are more likely to be in that fight or flight or that sympathetic nervous system dominance. It makes sense for them to use glucose and not deprive themselves of that because they are naturally in a higher stress-based environment where their body's revved up to a far greater degree. Their engine is always on and it's always burning glucose. So if you put them on a keto-based diet, it would be very, very destructive for them and their nervous system because their nervous system is not quite adapted in the same way to be able to use ketones, nor would it want to when its preferred fuel source is glucose. So if you are the endomorphic body type, larger body type, it makes a lot more sense, especially if you are a male. Now, why would it make less sense if you're a female? Well, as a female, you can get great short-term results, and that's how we use it in our practice. We use for the first 21 days, we have something called our Fatlocity diet plan. I'll link that up in the show notes. Just go to stevencabral.com/690. Again, I'm going to explain it to you right now so you don't have to purchase this plan. So what it is it's a lower carb diet that allows you to intermittently go in and out of a state of ketosis, typically overnight, where you can start to tap into more body fat because by the end of the day, your body is completely depleted of glucose, especially after doing workouts, which workouts will deplete your glucose at a faster rate, getting you into a state of ketosis. This will allow you then to tap into great amounts of body fat without metabolizing your muscle. How do we know this? 250,000 client appointments worth of data where we track body fat every 6 weeks. We track muscle mass, lean muscle mass gain, all of these things. And of course, people are doing 2 workouts minimum per week. So that does matter as well, which I should say is strength-based training. Okay, why doesn't it work for a lot of women in the long term? Here's why. Women's bodies are far more sensitive because of reproductive-based issues, meaning that if your body is put in a state of ketosis, your body clearly thinks that there is a shortage of food, that it is more of a starvation-based diet, more of a survival-based diet. What happens then? Norepinephrine increases, cortisol increases, which is called glucocorticoids. As glucocorticoids increase, it decreases the conversion from T4 to T3, or it blunts T3's action and it can actually reverse, so it can move T3 to reverse T3, which is unusable by the body. At the same time, your body is increasing its amounts of glucocorticoids in the bloodstream, in the body. It is actually slowing, or I should say, it's actually stopping and slowing and using up the amount of progesterone in the body. The amount of progesterone in the body is crucial in the luteal phase of a female's menstrual-based cycle. That means the last 2 weeks of a female cycle, predominantly somewhere around days 19 to 23 or 24, which is peak implementation, is really important. That's the stage. That's when a woman is most fertile. That's when you are most likely to get pregnant. So if we look at that and we look at a lower progesterone-based release or less progesterone, we're looking at less of a chance of getting pregnant. Now, you could say, oh, well, we need to do supplemental progesterone. No. Your body knows that it's not in a state. So remember, 95% of all disease, this includes fertility, this includes autoimmune, this includes Hashimoto's, includes everything. 95% of all disease, you have to understand this, is lifestyle and diet. And diet is basically lifestyle. So let's just say lifestyle. Now, your lifestyle right now, I know you're doing this with good intentions because you want to transform your body. You want to burn body fat. I understand that. But what happens is you're telling your body, yes, we're going to tap into body fat. I understand that. But we're lowering levels of leptin and ghrelin. We're lowering levels of progesterone. We're lowering levels of thyroid. Not in every woman, but in a lot. In my practice, quite a bit. So when we have this, there's no way your body's going to say, yeah, this seems like a great idea. Why don't we bring a child into this world in a highly stressed, no food-based environment? Of course not. Your body knows better than that. Remember, we can't fool nature. We can't fool nature, and it's not a good idea to fool nature. So what is my takeaway from this? My takeaway is this. You have to start asking questions. Always question, okay, this is the current fad of the day. And it's not that keto is a fad because there's good research behind it. Again, I'm giving you the research. I'm saying, yes, it does work. I'm saying I use it in the short term, 3 weeks, up to 3 weeks. I use it for the Dr. Bell detox. 2 days, you're doing four shakes a day. 2 days, okay? But here's the thing. Yes, and it works for a lot of people, they've shown, who have tumor-based cancers. Okay, so let's call it a cancer-based diet, then a tumor-cancer-based diet, but let's not call it a long-term good diet. And I want you to ask yourself, so all I'm trying to do is open your mind. That's it. You don't have to agree with me. I don't even want you to. I want you to decide what's best for you. But I want to give you a couple other facts. Here's the thing. If you are on a predominantly high-fat, low-carb diet for a long period of time, you have to understand what it's doing to your gut flora. When you're on a high-fat, high-saturated fat, not monosaturated like with olive oil and avocado, but a high-saturated fat does actually create inflammation in the intestines because of a proliferation of certain types of bacteria. The other thing it does is it wipes out a lot of good bacteria. And it does this because you are removing prebiotics, which are a lot of carbs that you eat, from feeding the good bacteria. So keep in mind, is that good in the long term? Just start to question it. Just think about it. You are also changing your cell receptors, as well as potentially the health and utilization of your pancreas, meaning like your body's ability of the alpha and beta cells of the pancreas to produce insulin. It's something to think about. It's just something to think about. What I also like to think about is this. What are the short-term benefits versus the long-term benefits? And if something is beneficial, such as low carb, right? Or keto, does that mean that it has to be for the rest of your life? Again, it's one of those things to think about. And that's all I want you to do. Can we not be in only one camp or the other? Can I be someone that says, I believe in keto, I believe in low carb, because I believe in the research. However, the long-term research, the repercussions of being in keto for too long, they don't look good. They really don't, because it causes quite a bit of nervous system-based stress. And it seems to affect women to an even greater degree, and ectomorphs both men and women to a greater degree as well. So what I want to tell you is this, is one more thing I would question. 75% of your diet being fat. Does that make sense to you? In the long term, does that make sense? Meaning that if the Blue Zones diet, the centennials, the people who live to 100 plus years old, if the majority of their diet are brightly colored fruits and vegetables, predominantly vegetables, if 75% of their diet is predominantly fruits and vegetables, do you think that they were messing up and they really should have been on a 75% fat-based diet? Do you think as humans we would be more attracted to brightly colored fruits and vegetables, beautiful blues, reds, greens, oranges, yellows, all of these colors? Do you think we'd be more attracted to that or bland whites and browns, right? What would attract us most in nature? Seeing this beautiful green apple or peppers or sweet potato or blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, cherries? Would we be more attracted to that, or would we be looking at, pork flesh eaten raw, or looking at, always eating coconuts? So all I want you to do is think about that from a human-based perspective. And also, what might be easier to get if you were living near the equator in lush tropics, not over the last couple hundred years or even a couple thousand years, many, many years ago in our genetics? Would it be easier and more plentiful to pick produce, fruits and vegetables all around us before humans started cutting everything down? Or would it be easier to go after all of these other things that need to be also sprouted, like nuts and seeds? Just, again, something to think about, all right? That's what I always do. I question everything. I'm the biggest skeptic in the world. You've heard me say it before, but I didn't travel to India, Sri Lanka, China, Europe, the United States, and live in some really hard conditions when I was over in clinics in India, Sri Lanka, and China. They weren't always easy to live there. They weren't. And it took a little bit of a strong mindset to push through some days in the conditions. However, I was very skeptical. I wanted to see what worked. So remember, whenever I'm giving you information, I'm looking at all of it through a skeptic's vantage point and a skeptic's viewpoint. And I'm looking, does this work? Yes or no? And in the case of keto and low carb, yes, it works for burning body fat and losing weight. Absolutely, it works. And then I ask the question, now, does it work for the long term? So my philosophy is this. In this case, it works in the short term, but not a great long-term philosophy. Might you undulate in and out of it every couple weeks or a couple months? That's a different story. I can get behind that, but I can't get behind a long-term keto-based diet. I can't. Not for a period of months. To me, it's depriving the body, it's depleting the body of quite a bit of minerals. It's using up additional levels of stress hormones, and in the long run, it probably will burn you out, and it's going to really break down your intestines. Now, again, you don't have to believe me, because you can actually run an organic acids test to look at your gut flora, and you can run an adrenal-based test or better yet, run a thyroid adrenal-based test while on a keto-based diet and check out your hormone levels. See on a typical weekday, on a typical stress day, are you in a state of fight or flight, or are you burnt out? Are your cortisol levels too low? And what's your thyroid look like? What does that look like? Check that out. I'm telling you right now, it is something worth looking into if you believe that this is right for you. Question everything. If you do that, you're going to be better off in the long run. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into today's show. Thank you, everyone, for having an open mind. And I appreciate everyone that you're sharing this show with. It means a lot to me. It's really moving this message forward. I can't thank you enough. Have a great day. I'll talk with you soon. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.